Howdy partner, AJ here. Today I'll be showing you how to create a Wild West wanted poster inside Photoshop so you can turn yourself into a wanted outlaw. It's simple to create and it looks great, so let's just jump right in. The first thing I'm going to do is create a background. Just grab an image of old textured paper for this. Depending on the image you start off with, you might want to blend other textures on top of this. In my case, I've added another image of paper, this time with dust marks and scratches on it, and I've set its blend mode to multiply. Just use whatever blend mode works for you. Next, we'll create some text. Let's start with the word wanted. Hit T on the keyboard, drag and create a text box, and then type up the word wanted. If you don't have any Western themed fonts already, websites like DaFont have some great fonts you can download and use for free. I'll link DaFont in the description below. Now let's add some visual elements around the text. Let's start with a line above and below the word wanted. Come down here to the rectangle tool, right-click, and select the line tool from the menu. Make sure this setting here is set to shape, and then draw a line above the text, holding down Shift, so that the line is perfectly horizontal. We can change the aesthetics of the line in the appearance settings inside the properties panel. I'm just going to give my line black fill and stroke properties and keep the line relatively thin. I'm also going to change these settings to round off the ends of the line. Let's now copy and paste this line and reposition it so that we've got another line below the word wanted. If you want to include any stars in your poster, here's how you can go about doing that. Go to the line tool, right-click, and this time select the polygon tool from the menu. Then double-click on your composition and make sure you do the following in the menu that pops up. Set the width and height of the composition to the same number so that it is square, the number of sides to 5, and the star ratio to 47%. Hit OK, and now you'll be able to edit the color and other properties of the star using the appearance settings in the properties, just like we did with the lines. I just want one star in my poster, and since I want to place it here, it means this line kind of gets in the way now. By creating a layer mask for the line, and then using the brush tool, I can paint away the middle part of the line. This only works when the colors here are white and black, and when black is in the foreground, because we are subtracting from the mask. Now let's create a frame for our subject to sit in. Go back to the polygon tool, right-click, and this time select the rectangle tool. Double-click on the canvas and set the width and height to the same value so that you get a square, and then hit OK. If you need to reposition the square, you can select the Path Selection tool here to do so. Just right-click to make sure you haven't accidentally selected the Make Selection tool instead, because these tools look quite similar. Since we're creating a frame, all we need is just a stroke around this square. We also want to create a layer of noise to function as the background once we place our subject in, so hit Ctrl J and duplicate the frame. Change the settings of this second layer so that it has a black fill. Select the filled square, go to Filter, Noise, and then Add Noise. If a prompt pops up asking if you want to convert the square into a smart object or rasterize it when you do this, just hit Convert to Smart Object. Then crank the noise value right up to 400% in the noise settings, and then hit OK. After that, hit Ctrl I to invert the layer, and then place it underneath the square with no fill. Change the blending mode to multiply. Now for the subject. I've got my subject here, and I just masked him out using the pen tool prior to this. Place your subject inside the square and in between the frame and noise layer. Then go to Image, Adjustments, and then Threshold. Adjust the threshold level so that your subject is neither over nor underexposed. Change the blending mode to multiply. Create a layer mask for the noise layer, and then use a brush with a low flow value to paint away some of the noise. The effect works well if you just remove some of the noise off the highlights, and then just remove a couple of random parts from the background. Remember, black has to be the foreground color and white has to be the background color for this to work. While you can certainly use a soft round brush to do this, I found later on that a dust brush actually gave me better results, so I redid this step with a dust brush later on. Let's now add some more text below the subject. You may want to include things like the name of this wanted person, as well as the handsome reward one gets for bringing them in, dead or alive. If they're a man with no name, skip the name part entirely. The text in this poster should be slightly faded away, considering how old it's supposed to be. So decrease the opacity value down to 95% or even lower. Do this with all the other text, lines and stars too. Finally, let's add a camera raw filter to enhance the composition. First hit Ctrl-Shift-Alt-E on the keyboard. This flattens all the layers into a separate layer, meaning that it gives you the option to come back and make a change if you ever need to, even after the filter has been applied. To actually get to the camera raw filter settings, just click the 6th option from the top under the filter settings. Feel free to play with the sliders as you see fit, but it seemed to me that there were only 2 main directions I could take this poster using the camera raw filter. If you want the filter to look more faded out, try increasing the exposure values and decreasing the contrast and saturation values. If you want to emphasize all the dust marks and grime on your paper instead, bring up the contrast and blacks. You can do most of this in the basic settings, but most people would say that the point of a poster is to hang it up somewhere. So how can we do this inside Photoshop? Well, it's basically just a matter of pasting your image onto a wall. But to make this more realistic, we can add a shadow behind our poster. Create an exposure layer here. Drag this slider to the left in order to reduce the exposure, and then hit Ctrl-I to invert the layer mask of the exposure adjustment layer. Then you can just use the brush tool to paint the shadow back. To create these rips in the poster, again create a layer mask and then just use the brush tool to paint away bits of the poster. You can even create holes inside the actual poster using this technique. Here's the final image, and thanks for watching. And if you ever do see this dangerous cowboy around, be sure to let me know where you saw him in the comments below.